The date is March 31st, 1985. The grand spectacle of WrestleMania, an audacious gamble by the World Wrestling Federation, unfurls within the iconic Madison Square Garden. Amidst the glitz, the celebrity fanfare, and the palpable anticipation, a hush falls as a behemoth of a man, bald and menacing, lumbers towards the ring. This is King Kong Bundy, a pugnacious, trash-talking villain, a force of nature whose very presence radiates intimidation. His opponent, S.D. Jones, a seasoned if somewhat outmatched competitor, stands little chance. The bell rings, and in a mere 24 seconds, though announced as a bewildering 9, Bundy flattens Jones with an avalanche splash. This was not just a victory, it was an annihilation. The emphatic, brutal birth of a new monster within the Federation landscape. The immediate aftermath saw the company's strategic machinery whir into action, meticulously crafting Bundy's narrative. His dominating victories became a recurring motif, a chilling testament to his destructive power. He was an unstoppable force, a wrecking ball in human form, a seemingly insurmountable obstacle for any who dared to cross his path. The Federation methodically built him up over the next year, not merely as a formidable opponent, but as a genuine threat, a monster engineered to challenge Hulk Hogan, who by now had established himself as the very foundation of the Federation's burgeoning empire. The inevitable collision arrived, not in a thunderclap, but in a series of calculated, brutal maneuvers. In March 1986, at Saturday night's main event, Bundy, aided by Don Muraco, ambushed Hogan, delivering a series of relentless avalanches and big splashes that left the immortal Hulkster with severely bruised ribs. This act of calculated aggression set the stage for their colossal clash, a steel cage match at WrestleMania 2, a contest that transcended mere sport to become a battle for dominance, a test of will between an injured hero and an unyielding beast. The anticipation was feverish. Could the Hulkster, still nursing his wounds, withstand the onslaught of this relentless juggernaut? The match itself was a savage affair, a classic David versus Goliath struggle, albeit with a monstrous Goliath. Ultimately, as wrestling history dictates, the hero prevailed. Hogan, overcoming the odds, escaped the cage, retaining his championship and sending Bundy to a resounding defeat. And this is where the story takes a perplexing turn, a narrative thread that begs the question, why did this daunting monster, so convincingly portrayed, so integral to a WrestleMania main event, seemingly vanish from the upper echelons of the Federation? After that career-defining loss, King Kong Bundy's trajectory began a gradual, almost imperceptible decline, a slow descent from the peak of his power. He was, to put it bluntly, buried, and, in a more sinister twist, ultimately omitted from the pantheon of legends that is the company's Hall of Fame. How could a wrestler of such undeniable presence, a performer who headlined one of the most significant events in wrestling history, a true icon of the larger-than-life 1980s Federation era, be seemingly erased from the official memory? The answer, as we shall uncover, lies in a complex interplay of Vince McMahon's strategic vision, the transient nature of wrestling's hierarchy, and, perhaps most definitively, a legal dispute that sealed his fate. Christopher Allen Pallies, the man behind the terrifying facade of King Kong Bundy, was born in Woodbury, New Jersey in 1955. A formidable presence even in his youth, he wrestled heavyweight in high school, honing the raw power that would define his professional career. His training at Larry Sharp's Monster Factory in New Jersey was foundational, shaping him into a performer capable of executing his devastating power moves with chilling precision. His early career saw him don various monikers before relocating to Texas in 1982. It was in world-class championship wrestling, under the tutelage of the legendary Von Erich family, that the King Kong Bundy persona truly began to coalesce. Initially a babyface known as Big Daddy Bundy, a dispute with the Von Erichs led to a dramatic heel turn, transforming him into the menacing, bald-headed, black singlet-clad brute that would become his enduring image. His tendency to demand a 5 count for pinfalls, a gimmick he perfected in Mid-South wrestling, added another layer to his intimidating aura, showcasing his absolute dominance over his opponents. He was not merely beating them, he was humiliating them. When Bundy officially debuted in the Federation in early 1985, he arrived as a fully formed phenomenon. His squash matches became legendary, culminating in the infamous S.D. Jones encounter at WrestleMania 1. This immediate and overwhelming success set the stage for his association with Bobby Heenan, a partnership that elevated his villainous persona to new heights. The feud with Andre the Giant, precisely crafted to demonstrate Bundy's capacity for inflicting legitimate injury, further solidified his status as a top-tier heel. The colossal jostle at Madison Square Garden in September 1985, though ending in a disqualification, showcased Bundy's ability to stand toe-to-toe with the eighth wonder of the world. However, the defining moment, the crescendo of his initial Federation run, was undoubtedly his rivalry with Hulk Hogan. The angle involving Hogan's bruised ribs, a seemingly insurmountable injury, transformed Bundy from a mere antagonist into a credible threat to the very fabric of Hulkamania. The steel cage match at WrestleMania 2 was the culmination of this carefully constructed narrative, positioning Bundy as the ultimate challenge to Hogan's dominance. And while he ultimately lost, the sheer magnitude of the match, the grand stage on which it was contested, cemented his place in wrestling lore. He had stared down the biggest star in the industry, and for a fleeting moment had him on the ropes. But after WrestleMania 2, the slow fade began. The monster had served his purpose. He had been built up, he had terrorized the champion, and he had ultimately been vanquished, further solidifying Hogan's heroic narrative. Vince McMahon's formula, a recurring motif throughout the golden era of the Federation, was clear. Build a monstrous heel, feed them to Hogan, and then, almost inevitably, push them down the card, their once fearsome aura gradually dissipating. Bundy's career trajectory post-WrestleMania 2 is a stark illustration of this pattern. While he continued to feature prominently in tag team action, most notably reforming his partnership with Big John Studd to feud with the Machines, the individual spotlight began to dim. Their battles with the British Bulldogs for the tag team championship, while significant, did not carry the same weight as his main event aspirations. He was still a powerful presence, but no longer the singular, all-consuming threat. The most poignant example of his shifting status arrived at WrestleMania 3 in 1987. Just 1 year after headlining WrestleMania 2, King Kong Bundy found himself in a mixed six-man tag team match, a far cry from the main event spotlight. Teaming with midget wrestlers Little Tokyo and Lord Littlebrook against Hillbilly Jim, the Haiti Kid, and Little Beaver, the match was explicitly designed for comedic effect, a striking contrast to the brutal intensity of his prior WrestleMania appearance. The bout effectively marked his relegation from a legitimate threat to a figure of light-hearted amusement. The monster had been defanged, his terrifying visage repurposed for laughs. Despite reaching the finals of the King of the Ring tournament in 1987 and a count-out victory over Hogan on Saturday night's main event, Bundy's appearances on syndicated Federation television shows became increasingly infrequent. By early 1988, he was primarily wrestling house shows, often losing to up-and-coming stars like Bam Bam Bigelow. His last match during this initial Federation run, a tag team loss at Madison Square Garden in February 1988, was a quiet, almost unceremonious exit for a man who had once stood on wrestling's grandest stage. After his departure from the Federation in 1988, Bundy entered a period of semi-retirement, making sporadic appearances for various independent promotions. His brief stint in World Championship Wrestling in early 1994, confined mostly to house shows and squash matches against enhancement talent, further underscored his fading prominence on the national stage. His return to the Federation in the fall of 1994 as a member of the $1 Million Corporation initially held promise. He had a strong showing at Survivor Series and was even billed as a favorite in the 1995 Royal Rumble. However, his elimination after a mere 3 minutes by Mabel was a clear indication that his second run would not replicate the heights of his first. The ultimate indignity came at WrestleMania 11, where he was defeated by The Undertaker, a match that, while significant for The Undertaker's streak, further cemented Bundy's role as a stepping stone for other talents. He was quickly pushed down the card, wrestling dark matches before his eventual release in October 1995. So, why did Vince McMahon, the architect of the Federation's golden age, seemingly orchestrate this systematic burial and subsequent blacklisting of King Kong Bundy? The answer, as hinted earlier, lies partly in McMahon's established business model for monster heels. For McMahon, these formidable antagonists served a specific crucial purpose: to make Hulk Hogan look stronger, more resilient, and ultimately more heroic. Once the monster had served this function, their utility in McMahon's eyes diminished. They had been fed to Hogan, and the cycle continued with the next formidable challenger. Bundy was a victim of this effective, albeit ruthless strategy. He was exceptionally good at what he did, so good that he was perfectly suited for the role of the menacing, yet ultimately conquerable obstacle. However, the far more direct and defining reason for Bundy's ultimate blacklisting and exclusion from the Hall of Fame emerged later with his involvement in a class action lawsuit against the company. In July 2016, he joined a lawsuit alleging that wrestlers incurred long-term neurological injuries due to the company's negligence and that the company fraudulently misrepresented and concealed the nature and extent of those injuries. While the case was eventually dismissed, the act of suing the company, and by extension, Vince McMahon himself, is almost certainly the primary reason for Bundy's exclusion from the Hall of Fame. McMahon, known for his fiercely protective nature of his company and his business practices, has a long history of essentially blacklisting individuals who have publicly challenged him or his organization, particularly through legal means. The Hall of Fame, while presented as a celebration of wrestling's greatest figures, also served as a powerful symbol of loyalty and allegiance to McMahon's empire. And for daring to challenge the empire, Bundy wasn't just ignored, he was erased. King Kong Bundy was more than just a monstrous heel. He was a towering force who helped define the Federation's golden era, headlining WrestleMania 2 and delivering moments seared into the memory of a generation. But after playing his role to perfection, he was quietly discarded, reduced to a punchline, and ultimately erased from the company's legacy. His decision to stand up to the machine in a high-profile lawsuit ensured his blacklisting, proving once again that in wrestling, the real fight often happens far from the ring. The date is April 5, 1992, and the Hoosier Dome in Indianapolis pulses with an electric current generated by over 62,000 souls. The air is thick with anticipation, a visceral hum that reverberates through the very foundations of the arena. Inside the squared circle, a drama of Shakespearean proportions is unfolding. Macho Man Randy Savage, a man whose career has already etched itself into the annals of professional wrestling as legendary, stands at a precipice. His opponent, the Nature Boy Ric Flair, embodies everything Savage has fought against in recent months: arrogance, deceit, and a malicious intent to smear the reputation of Miss Elizabeth, the woman Savage holds dearest. When the final bell tolls, the roar of the crowd is deafening. Savage, his face a mask of triumph and vindication, has pinned Ric Flair. He raises the championship belt high above his head, a gleaming testament to his prowess, his resilience, and his unwavering love. The celebratory fireworks explode as Savage embraces Elizabeth, the picture of a true champion, a hero redeemed. He is back on top, at the pinnacle of glory, bathed in the adulation of a stadium full of screaming fans. This should have been the dawn of a new era, the triumphant return of the Macho Man to the very summit of sports entertainment, a reign that would cement his legacy even further. Yet just over 2 years later, Randy Savage would be gone from the World Wrestling Federation. Not just gone, but seemingly erased from the company he had so fundamentally shaped. His name, once synonymous with excellence and spectacle, would become a whisper, rarely spoken in the hallowed halls of Stamford, Connecticut. What happened? How could a figure so central, so vital to the Federation's golden age, vanish so completely, his very existence seemingly scrubbed from the official narrative? Why would Vince McMahon, the architect of this grand empire, seek to obliterate the memory of one of his most iconic stars? This is the story of Macho Man Randy Savage. The meteoric rise, the dazzling spectacle, the agonizing betrayal, and the enduring mystery of his seemingly intentional erasure from the annals of Federation history. To understand the bitter end, one must first comprehend the magnificent beginning. Randy Mario Poffo possessed an innate understanding of showmanship and an athletic prowess honed by a brief but impactful career in professional baseball. The son of Angelo Poffo, a wrestling veteran, Randy's destiny seemed always to lie within the ropes. He honed his craft in regional territories, most notably his father's International Championship Wrestling and the Continental Wrestling Association in Memphis. It was in these proving grounds that the Macho Man persona began to take shape, including the flamboyant attire, the growling intensity, and the gravelly soon-to-be iconic manner of speech. It was a character designed to grab attention, to demand it, and Randy Savage delivered, with a captivating blend of athletic dynamism and unhinged charisma. In 1985, the World Wrestling Federation, under the ambitious vision of Vince McMahon, was expanding nationally, hungry for magnetic talent. Savage, with his undeniable star power, was a natural fit. His debut was accompanied by a feverish bidding war storyline, with various managers vying for his services. He ultimately chose the elegant and enigmatic Miss Elizabeth as his manager, a decision that would forever intertwine their destinies and become the emotional core of his Federation narrative. Elizabeth, with her demure beauty and quiet strength, provided a perfect contrast to Savage's volatile intensity, creating a dynamic that transcended typical wrestling storylines and captivated audiences worldwide. Savage's ascent in the company was meteoric. He quickly established himself as a top-tier heel, an arrogant, unpredictable force of nature who wrestled with a savage fervor. His matches were masterpieces of athleticism and storytelling, and his interviews were hypnotic in their bizarre cadence. His feud with George the Animal Steele, centered around Steele's infatuation with Miss Elizabeth, was an early highlight, showcasing Savage's ability to draw intense heat and elicit strong emotional responses from the crowd. He captured the Intercontinental Championship from Tito Santana, embarking on a legendary reign that culminated in an iconic clash with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat at WrestleMania 3 in 1987, a match widely regarded as one of the greatest in wrestling history. Their intricate, fast-paced encounter, a symphony of perfectly executed maneuvers, solidified Savage's reputation as an elite in-ring performer. But it was his alliance and subsequent implosion with Hulk Hogan that truly defined Savage's initial run as a main event player. The Mega Powers, formed in a moment of crisis at the main event in 1987, saw Hogan and Savage unite against a common foe. This tag team, featuring the two biggest stars in the company, was an unprecedented phenomenon. Yet beneath the surface of their glorious success, a slow-burning jealousy festered, fueled by Savage's increasing paranoia about Hogan's perceived wandering eye towards Miss Elizabeth. This angle blurred the lines between reality and kayfabe with unprecedented effectiveness, tapping into primal fears of betrayal and suspicion. The eventual breakup of the Mega Powers, culminating in their epic confrontation at WrestleMania 5, was not merely a wrestling match. It was a societal event, a dramatic narrative that had gripped millions. Savage, the spurned lover and paranoid genius, took on the role of the ultimate villain, while Hogan remained the all-American hero. After his feud with Hogan, Savage embraced his villainous side fully, crowning himself the Macho King and adopting Sensational Sherry as his new manager. His promos became even more unhinged, his attire more outlandish, and his matches more vicious. He challenged the Ultimate Warrior at WrestleMania 7 in another critically acclaimed encounter. This match ended with Savage losing, but, in a surprisingly emotional turn, being reunited with Miss Elizabeth, sparking a genuine outpouring of affection from the audience. This marked his transition back to a beloved babyface, setting the stage for his next major storyline, and the very moment our story began. The road to WrestleMania 8 was paved with intrigue and personal attacks. Ric Flair, the arrogant Real World's champion, began to claim a sordid past with Miss Elizabeth, even presenting doctored photographs to support his outrageous assertions. This deeply personal attack struck Savage at his core, reigniting the protective fire within him and fueling a feud that was as much about honor and love as it was about championship gold. The narrative built to a crescendo, culminating in that triumphant night in Indianapolis, where Savage not only reclaimed the championship, but also vindicated Elizabeth's honor and his own. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated heroism, a feel-good victory that resonated deeply with fans. For many, this should have been the rebirth of Macho Man's career in the 1990s. He was a seasoned veteran, still at the top of his game athletically, a proven draw and a beloved figure. He had just emerged from a deeply personal and compelling storyline as a champion. He was, to all appearances, poised to lead the company into a new era. But Vince McMahon, ever the visionary, or perhaps the ruthless pragmatist, had other plans. The slow exile began almost imperceptibly. By late 1992 and into 1993, Randy Savage's in-ring appearances began to diminish. Vince McMahon, always looking to the future, had begun to focus his creative energies on a new generation of stars, including Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, and the heavily pushed Lex Luger. Savage, despite his undeniable drawing power, was slowly transitioned away from active competition and into a role at the commentary booth. While Savage was undeniably gifted on the microphone and brought a unique, frenetic energy to the broadcast table, it was clear that his true passion lay between the ropes. He wanted to wrestle. He believed he still had years of main event performances left in him. Sitting behind a table and calling matches rather than competing in them was a frustration that simmered beneath his always intense exterior. The tension was building, a silent but potent rift forming between the perfectionist, obsessive Savage and his increasingly distant employer. The betrayal, in Vince McMahon's eyes, arrived in the fall of 1994. Randy Savage left the World Wrestling Federation and soon resurfaced in World Championship Wrestling, the Federation's direct competitor, making a dramatic debut that immediately elevated the rival promotion. For Vince McMahon, this was not merely another wrestler jumping ship. Savage was different. He wasn't just an employee, he was family. He was one of the foundational pillars of the Federation's golden age, a key architect of its greatest storylines, a man who had bled and sweat and poured his entire being into the company. His departure to the competition, especially during the burgeoning Monday Night Wars, was perceived as the ultimate act of disloyalty, a personal affront that went beyond mere business. The contrast between Savage's perceived diminished role in the Federation and his thriving career in WCW only exacerbated the perceived insult. Alongside his old rival Hulk Hogan, Savage found renewed vigor, participating in high-profile storylines, capturing multiple championships, and proving that his main event days were far from over. He became a crucial component of his new employer's success during the Monday Night Wars, inadvertently twisting the knife deeper into Vince McMahon's wounded pride. The damage to their relationship was permanent, an unbridgeable chasm formed by what McMahon surely viewed as a heinous act of infidelity. But there was another layer, a far darker and more insidious set of circumstances that became inextricably linked to Savage's exile and subsequent erasure. Over the years, whispers turned into rumors. Dark, unverified stories claiming Savage had crossed an unthinkable line. The most infamous of these involved Stephanie McMahon, Vince's daughter, who was significantly younger than Savage. The rumor, which gained currency in the shadowy corners of the wrestling world, suggested an inappropriate romantic involvement. Nothing was ever proven. Nothing credible was ever presented. It remained, and still remains, entirely unsubstantiated gossip. But in wrestling circles, the rumor became legend, a persistent, uncomfortable undercurrent. Whether true or not, whether a baseless fabrication or a twisted kernel of truth, it became one more reason fans and industry insiders believed Vince McMahon would never forgive him. It added a profoundly personal, deeply disturbing dimension to the narrative of betrayal. Unlike other prominent stars who had left the Federation and later returned, including Hulk Hogan and even Bret Hart, who suffered a far more public and egregious slight, Randy Savage was never brought back into the fold. There was no reconciliation, no Hall of Fame induction while he was alive, no nostalgic appearances. His name was almost never mentioned on Federation programming throughout the Attitude Era and beyond, a period when the company was constantly mining its rich history for content. For over a decade, it was as if Macho Man never existed within the official narrative of the company he had helped build. His iconic matches, his groundbreaking interviews, and his unforgettable character work all seemed to be relegated to a silent, unacknowledged past. This deliberate silence, this systematic exclusion, spoke volumes. It cemented the idea that Vince McMahon's unforgiveness ran deep, fueled by both the professional slight of his jump to WCW and the insidious personal rumors. Randy Poffo lived a relatively quiet life in Florida in his later years, far from the spotlight he once commanded with such ferocity. He married his old love, Lynn Payne, a woman who brought him peace and stability. But on May 20, 2011, While driving with Lynn, Randy Savage suffered a sudden cardiac event and lost control of his vehicle, colliding with a tree. He died at the age of 58. The news sent shockwaves through the wrestling world, a tragic end to a life lived so intensely. It was only after his death, 4 years later, that WWE finally relented. In 2015, Randy Savage was posthumously inducted into the company's Hall of Fame. His brother Lanny accepted the honor on his behalf. While a welcome recognition for fans and a long overdue tribute to one of wrestling's true icons, it was a bittersweet moment. Vince McMahon was present, but the reconciliation never happened in person. Savage never got to hear the cheers one last time, never stood on that stage to accept the accolades from the company he had given so much to. For many, this posthumous induction, devoid of any live reconciliation, was further proof that Vince McMahon never truly forgave the betrayal, both professional and rumored personal. It was an act of recognition perhaps, but not necessarily an act of forgiveness. Macho Man Randy Savage was brilliance and chaos bound in one man. A revolutionary performer whose paranoia and perfectionism became both his fuel and his curse. His career is marked by betrayal, rumor, and a strange exile that seemed to erase him from wrestling's memory. Yet in the end, the legend proved unerasable. Savage was not forgotten. He was immortalized, and perhaps that, in the end, was the truest madness of all. The date is November 22nd, 1990, and the venue is the Hartford Civic Center. The air is charged with electricity, thick with the scent of popcorn and the roar of a sold-out crowd. It's Thanksgiving Day, a time for family and feasting, but for the 16,000 packed into the arena and the wider world watching at home, the long-awaited spectacle of the Survivor Series is the only thing that matters. A colossal 8-man tag team match pits 4 of the World Wrestling Federation's most dominant forces against the cold, calculating treachery of Mr. Perfect and the sinister brute force of Demolition. A collective gasp of anticipation rises as a familiar anthem blares through the arena's sound system. The first fan favorite to emerge is a hero from Texas, his long hair flowing behind him, his muscular physique and chiseled features a testament to a life spent in peak physical condition. He is the Texas Tornado, Kerry Von Erich, and he is, to all appearances, on top of the world. Just 3 months earlier, at SummerSlam, he had done the seemingly impossible, defeating the cocky, arrogant Intercontinental Champion, Mr. Perfect. The victory wasn't just a win, it was a coronation. In a company where championships were the ultimate currency of prestige, Kerry Von Erich had seized one of the most coveted titles and, in doing so, had solidified his status as a major player, a beloved fan favorite, and an undeniable star. He is soon joined by his teammates, the post-apocalyptic, face-painted duo of the Legion of Doom, their spiked shoulder pads and animalistic snarls a promise of pure, unadulterated carnage. Then the thunderous, manic energy of the Federation champion, the Ultimate Warrior, sprints to the ring, shaking the ropes and roaring to the heavens as if channeling a primal spirit. Tonight, Kerry stands alongside this legendary champion and a pair of monstrous tag team icons, a hero among heroes. He is at the pinnacle of professional wrestling, a man who has seemingly tamed his demons and risen to heights his father could only have dreamed of. But there is a tragic irony at play, an ominous ticking clock hidden beneath the surface of this triumph. 25 months from this moment, the cheers would be silent, the lights would be out. Kerry Von Erich would be gone. Not just gone from the World Wrestling Federation, not just gone from the spotlight, but gone from this world, a life extinguished far too soon. How could a man so seemingly blessed, so physically gifted, and so adored by his fans, have unraveled so completely and so tragically in a mere 2 years? The answer lies not in his final act, but in the dark, intricate tapestry of a family curse, a devastating injury, and the insidious, soul-crushing grip of addiction. To understand the end, we must go back to the beginning. Kerry Jean Adkisson was born on February 3, 1960, into a world unlike any other. His father, Jack Adkisson, was the patriarch of a wrestling empire, the man known to the world as Fritz von Erich. Under his iron-fisted rule, world-class championship wrestling became an institution, a sprawling saga of heroic brothers and vile villains that captivated the South. Kerry, along with his brothers David, Kevin, Mike, and later Chris, would be thrust into this narrative from a young age, their lives interwoven with the spectacle of the wrestling ring. The Von Erich family name was synonymous with tragedy, a shadow that seemed to follow them at every turn, but in the early 1980s they were on fire. The Von Erichs, with their all-American looks and dynamic in-ring style, were beloved idols, and Kerry, with his magnetic charm and incredible athleticism, was the unquestioned golden boy. Before wrestling, Kerry was a standout athlete, a prodigious track and field star who specialized in the discus throw, even earning a spot on the 1980 US Olympic team before the boycott. This athleticism would serve him well in the ring, where his signature discus punch became a feared and respected finishing move. For a decade, from his debut in 1978 until his departure in 1989, he was the heart and soul of his father's company. He feuded with the legendary Ric Flair, battling him for the prestigious World's Heavyweight Championship. That rivalry culminated in his greatest career highlight, a moment of transcendence and national triumph that seemed to defy the darkness that had haunted his family. On May 6, 1984, in front of a record-breaking crowd of over 45,000 at Texas Stadium, Kerry Von Erich defeated Flair to win the heavyweight championship, a victory dedicated to his recently deceased brother David, for whom the event was named. It was an emotional and cathartic moment that cemented his place in wrestling history. But the glory was fleeting. He lost the title just 18 days later in a controversial finish, a reign cut short by what many believed was a series of unreliable no-shows that foreshadowed the struggles to come. In 1986, a catastrophic event shattered Kerry's life. A serious motorcycle accident resulted in a severely injured right leg and hip. The initial injury was bad enough, but a devastating series of events followed. According to his brother Kevin, Kerry attempted to walk on the leg prematurely in the hospital, re-injuring it and forcing doctors to amputate the foot. From that point on, Kerry wrestled with a prosthesis, a secret he guarded with paranoid secrecy. He would often shower and change with his boots on, a macabre ballet of deception to hide the truth from his colleagues and the world. The physical pain was immense, and with it came a crippling addiction to painkillers, a logical yet fatal consequence. The man who had been the picture of physical perfection was now a prisoner of his own body, reliant on a cocktail of drugs to simply function. His wrestling style had to change. The high-flying, agile moves were replaced by a more grounded, powerful offense. He became a whirlwind of fists and fury, but beneath the surface, a real storm was raging. By 1990, the Von Erich empire in Texas was in disarray, and in a move that shocked the wrestling world, Kerry signed with Vince McMahon's World Wrestling Federation. The federation had become the global powerhouse, a pop culture juggernaut that transcended the regional promotions of the past. Kerry was repackaged as the Texas Tornado, a heroic all-American character who was, despite the different name, an open extension of his established persona. The gamble paid off immediately. He debuted to a thunderous ovation on Saturday night's main event, and just 2 months later, at the company's biggest summer event, he was elevated to the status of a champion. When Brutus the Barber Beefcake was sidelined with an injury, the Texas Tornado stepped into the ring to face the reigning Intercontinental Champion, Mr. Perfect. In a quick and decisive match, he defeated Perfect to capture the title, a feat that announced his arrival on the grandest stage. Kerry's time in the Federation was a paradox of highs and lows. The aforementioned Survivor Series of November 1990, where he stood triumphant alongside the Ultimate Warrior and the Legion of Doom, represented the absolute zenith of his career. He held the Intercontinental title, one of the company's most prestigious belts, and was positioned alongside an elite group of top-tier talent. But the shine soon began to fade. He dropped the Intercontinental Championship back to Mr. Perfect on a taping of Superstars that aired on television the next month. The decision, some believe, was influenced by his growing unreliability and the whisper of personal issues. He was still a featured player, but his main event status was slowly, imperceptibly being eroded. He had his moment on the biggest stage of all, WrestleMania 7, where he defeated Dino Bravo with his signature discus punch. He participated in the Royal Rumble matches of 1991 and 1992, each time being eliminated by a different wrestling icon. First The Undertaker, then his old nemesis, Ric Flair. The cycle of his Federation career became one of slow, agonizing decline. He was still the heroic Texas Tornado, and he still drew a positive reaction from the crowd, but the storylines he was involved in were less and less consequential. By early 1992, he was an opening card act, feuding with lower-tier talent and suffering more and more losses. The physical toll of his injury was undeniable, and the hidden demon of his painkiller addiction had begun to rear its ugly head, affecting his performance and reliability. The end of his Federation tenure came quietly. His final televised match was a loss to Shawn Michaels in July 1992, a far cry from the main event status he had enjoyed 2 years prior. After a brief absence, he officially left the company in August 1992, his time at the top now a distant, fleeting memory. He returned to the independent circuit in Texas, a ghost of his former self, teaming with his old rival Chris Adams. But the demons were closing in. His marriage to his wife Catherine, with whom he had 2 daughters, ended in divorce. The legal troubles mounted, leading to 2 drug-related arrests. The second charge, a violation of his probation, threatened to land him in prison for a significant period of time. The pressure, the pain, the shame, and the crushing weight of a family history saturated with suicide proved too much to bear. Bret Hart, in his autobiography, recalled a chilling conversation he had with Kerry on a road trip in 1990, where Kerry confessed his desire to join his brothers David and Mike in the afterlife, a wish he repeated to Bret in 1992. On February 18, 1993, just 1 day after being indicted on the second drug charge, Kerry Von Erich went to his father's ranch. He told Fritz he loved him, gave him a final hug, and walked into the woods. A single shot rang out, a tragic final period on a story that was over far too soon. He was just 33 years old. The secret of his prosthetic foot would finally be revealed to the world after his death, a devastating confirmation of the pain and deception he had lived with for years. In the end, the Texas Tornado's story isn't one of a professional athlete's career decline. It is a profound and moving tragedy about a man who was burdened with the legacy of his family and a personal torment that ultimately proved inescapable. His time in the World Wrestling Federation, though brief and at times uneven, was a final glimpse of a man who was once at the very top of his game, a shining star who stood tall alongside the titans of the industry. For a few brief, glorious months, he was on top of the world. Then, just 25 months later, the light went out. May he rest in peace. The date is January 15, 1989, and the venue is the Houston Summit, a cauldron of anticipation, crackling with an energy only professional wrestling can ignite. Tonight, history will be made. 30 titans of the squared circle will converge in a no-holds-barred, every man for himself free-for-all. The Royal Rumble, and amidst this pantheon of gladiators, one man, a legend forged in the fires of countless battles, stands poised to etch his name deeper into the annals of World Wrestling Federation lore. The Royal Rumble match itself is a maelstrom of humanity. The ring, a canvas for chaos, sees alliances form and shatter, betrayals unfold, and Herculean efforts culminate in agonizing eliminations. Hulk Hogan, the undisputed face of the company, enters at number 18, unleashing a torrent of eliminations that showcase his unparalleled power and popularity. Yet even the seemingly invincible Hogan falls victim to the cunning tactics of the Twin Towers. The ring, once a crowded battlefield, begins to thin, the fallen giants and forgotten warriors littering the ringside area. Then, at number 27, Big John Studd makes his grand entrance. As he lumbers towards the ring, a collective gasp ripples through the assembled masses. He is an anachronism, a colossal throwback to a bygone era of brute strength and unadorned power. At 6 feet 10 inches and weighing in at a staggering 364 pounds, Studd is a monolith, a walking mountain of muscle and defiance. His face, etched with the scars of 1,000 wars, carries a stoic intensity that bespeaks a lifetime spent in the crucible of combat. He isn't flashy, he is simply and unequivocally a giant. He quickly makes his intentions clear, engaging Akeem, the African Dream, in a clash of titans. The ring, groaning under their combined weight, seems to shrink. As the clock ticks down and the final entrant, the $1 Million Man, buys his way in at number 30, the stakes escalate. Shortly thereafter, in a moment that epitomizes the ruthless nature of the contest, the $1 Million Man and Akeem, briefly united in their desire to eliminate Stud, ruin their chance. Stud, ever the opportunist, seizes the moment, dumping the gargantuan Akeem over the top rope, leaving him and the $1 Million Man as the final two. Stud, with a surge of adrenaline and raw power, slams him into the canvas. A butterfly suplex follows, a testament to Stud's deceptive agility despite his immense size. Then, following a thunderous clothesline, he hoists the $1 Million Man over the top rope, sending him crashing to the floor below. The arena erupts. Big John Studd, the forgotten giant, had triumphed. He stood alone in the center of the ring, arms raised in victory, the last man standing in the first ever 30-man Royal Rumble. It was a moment of profound vindication, a powerful declaration that his time at the top was far from over. This victory solidified his status as one of the Federation's most legendary titans, a testament to his enduring power and the respect he commanded. It felt like the beginning of a magnificent new chapter for the towering competitor. Yet less than 6 months later, in June of 1989, Big John Studd would be gone from the company. A fleeting moment of glory, a spectacular resurgence, only to vanish into the ether, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. How could a man who had just conquered in a battle of the toughest individuals in professional wrestling simply disappear? Why would Vince McMahon, the architect of this grand spectacle, discard a legend at the height of his improbable comeback? The answer, quite simply, is money, a familiar theme in the cutthroat world of professional wrestling, and a pivot in vision that left little room for the giants of yesteryear. To understand the curious case of Big John Studd's meteoric rise and precipitous fall, we must journey back to his beginnings, to the roots of the man who would become synonymous with the word giant. Born John William Minton, his immense size was evident from an early age. He was a natural athlete, excelling in basketball before joining the United States Army, serving as a military police officer in Vietnam. But the allure of the squared circle would ultimately draw him in. Trained by the legendary Killer Kowalski, Minton debuted in 1972 as the Mighty Minton for Hollywood Wrestling. His early career saw him form a formidable tag team with superstar Billy Graham. His size and raw power were undeniable, and it wasn't long before the Worldwide Wrestling Federation took notice. He joined the federation as Chuck O'Connor, even challenging Pedro Morales for the World Heavyweight Championship. His journey through the territorial system saw him hone his craft, adopting various personas and collecting championships along the way. In Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, he found a new identity, given to him by promoter Paul Bosch, who, upon seeing his sheer size, labeled him a stud. Thus, Big John Studd was born. He tasted tag team gold with Ken Patera and even performed as the masked superstar number 2 before unmasking. Studd made a return to the Federation in 1976, this time donning a mask as Executioner number 2, teaming with Executioner number 1 to capture the World Tag Team Championship. This reign, however, was short-lived, as a third Executioner interfered in a title defense, leading to them being stripped of the belts. He departed again in early 1977, continuing his travels, including a stint in the American Wrestling Association, where he feuded with legends like Mad Dog Vachon and The Crusher. These early years were his apprenticeship, a period of refining his character and solidifying his reputation. But it was his return to the World Wrestling Federation in late 1982 that truly cemented his legacy. This was the era of expansion, the dawn of a new national phenomenon, and Studd arrived as a monster heel, managed by the infamous classy Freddie Blassie. His gimmick was simple yet terrifying. He would bring a stretcher to the ring, promising to beat his opponents so severely that they would be carried out on it. This immediately established him as a dominant force and would set the stage for the feud that would define his career. The rivalry with Andre the Giant was not merely a wrestling storyline, it was a clash of mythic proportions. Both men were titans, legitimate giants, and the question of which of the two was the superior giant captivated audiences. The rivalry culminated at the inaugural WrestleMania in March 1985. The $15,000 body slam challenge carried an added stipulation. If Andre failed to slam Studd, he would be forced to retire. In a moment etched forever in the memories of wrestling fans, Andre definitively slammed Studd, securing a monumental victory and cementing his own legendary status. Despite the loss, Studd remained a prominent figure, forming an alliance with fellow Heenan family member King Kong Bundy. They continued their feud with Andre. The Machine storyline in 1986, where Andre donned a mask as the Giant Machine to circumvent a storyline suspension, saw Studd, Bundy, and Heenan vehemently trying to unmask him, adding another layer of intrigue. Studd even participated in the memorable Battle Royal at WrestleMania 2 alongside professional football players. This run in the Federation ultimately concluded in November 1986, as he stepped away from wrestling to pursue acting opportunities, leaving a significant void in the roster of Giants. His return to the company in December 1988 was met with considerable excitement. Appearing on the Brother Love show, Studd announced his comeback. An eager Bobby Heenan, still managing Andre the Giant, attempted to welcome Studd back into the Heenan family. However, in a surprising turn of events, Studd rejected the offer, running Heenan off the set and turning face, aligning himself with the fans. This set the stage for a brief but compelling feud with the Heenan family. This brings us back to the Royal Rumble of 1989. His victory was not just a personal triumph, it was a symbolic passing of the torch. A moment where an established veteran, one of the foundational giants of the Federation, proved he could still stand tall amidst a new generation of superstars. It was a feel-good story, a testament to perseverance and the enduring power of a true legend. The subsequent appointment as special guest referee for the WrestleMania 5 match between Jake Roberts and Andre the Giant further indicated his importance to the company. It seemed Big John Studd was back and here to stay, but the winds of change were blowing through the Federation, and they were gale force. By 1989, Vince McMahon was actively pivoting away from the Giant versus Giant attractions that had defined the early to mid-80s. Andre the Giant, though still revered, was breaking down physically due to his acromegaly. Studd, a veteran of the territorial days, simply didn't fit the new mold. McMahon was cultivating a new breed of stars, the high-octane charisma of Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage, the explosive power of the Ultimate Warrior, and the colorful, heavily merchandised stars that would define the golden era. Studd's style, while powerful and effective, was a throwback. The new federation demanded faster-paced action, more theatricality, and a focus on younger, fresher talent that could carry the company into the next decade. While his Royal Rumble win was a moment of glory, it was ultimately an anomaly, a final hurrah rather than a new beginning. Younger big men like the Big Boss Man were already being groomed for prominent roles, and the company's resources and creative energy were being poured into the meteoric rise of the Ultimate Warrior. Studd, despite his immense talent and undeniable presence, was increasingly seen as an 80s relic, a giant from a bygone era. The official reason for his departure in June 1989 was a financial dispute with Vince McMahon. It's a familiar refrain in the history of professional wrestling. Studd, having just won the Royal Rumble, likely felt he deserved a higher pay grade, a compensation commensurate with his legendary status and recent triumph. McMahon, however, with his sights set on a new direction and a new crop of stars, was unwilling to meet his asking price. In McMahon's eyes, Studd was becoming expendable. He was moving on, evolving the product, and Studd, for all his accomplishments, didn't fit the emerging blueprint. After his departure, Studd wrestled sporadically on the independent circuit. His health, however, was in decline. In October 1993, after a match, he collapsed due to low stamina, a grim sign of what was to come. He was battling cancer. John William Minton, Big John Studd, passed away on March 20, 1995, after a battle with liver cancer and Hodgkin's disease. His posthumous induction into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2004 served as a rightful acknowledgement of his indelible impact on professional wrestling. Big John Studd's story is a poignant one, a testament to the brutal realities of a constantly evolving industry. He was a true legend, a larger-than-life figure who commanded respect and instilled fear in the hearts of his opponents. His Royal Rumble victory was a glorious, fleeting moment of triumph, a final roar from a wrestling titan. But in the ruthless world of Vince McMahon's World Wrestling Federation, where innovation and evolution were paramount, even the most legendary giants could be deemed obsolete. It was the end of an era, a bittersweet closing chapter for one of professional wrestling's most compelling and colossal figures. May he rest in peace.